Most Australians will work for almost 45 years. Early alarms, traffic, emails, bills, stress, and slowly trading decades of their life for money. And after all of that, most will never become truly wealthy. Not because they're lazy, not because they're unintelligent, and not because wealth is impossible in Australia. The real reason is much more uncomfortable. Most Australians don't have an income problem, they have a gap problem. The gap between what comes in and what goes out. Because that gap, that is where wealth is created. And for most people, the gap never becomes large enough or stays open long enough to change their life. Here's how it starts. Someone gets their first decent pay rise. $65,000 becomes $85,000. Life suddenly feels easier. So naturally, they upgrade. Better apartment, newer car, more dinners out, slightly nicer holidays. Then another pay rise comes, and the lifestyle expands again. Bigger suburb, larger mortgage, more subscriptions, more repayments. Income grows, but their financial position barely moves. And the dangerous part? This feels completely normal, because almost everyone around them is doing the exact same thing. Australia has some of the highest household debt levels in the world. Huge mortgages, car loans, credit cards, buy now, pay later. People financing lifestyles their future selves are expected to survive. And this creates a strange modern illusion. People look wealthy while quietly living month to month. Now here's where the trap becomes almost invisible. A high income can actually make this worse. Someone earning $200,000 a year can still feel financially stressed. Why? Because banks lend them more. They buy larger homes, take on bigger repayments, upgrade everything, until eventually, their lifestyle requires that salary just to survive. That's not wealth. That's dependency with better furniture. Real wealth feels completely different. Wealth is ownership, assets, investments, cash flow, flexibility, time. Wealth is waking up knowing you could go months or even years without panic. Most Australians never reach that point because almost all of their money gets trapped inside consumption. Now let's talk about property, because this is where things become uniquely Australian. For decades, property has been the center of wealth in this country. And honestly, for many people, it worked. Australians who bought property early often became wealthy simply by holding long enough. But somewhere along the way, people started confusing owning an expensive home with building financial freedom. Those are not the same thing. Someone can live in a $2 million home and still feel stressed every single month. Because wealth trapped inside property does not automatically improve your day-to-day life. You still need cash flow, liquidity, income-producing assets. But many Australians poured almost everything into one giant mortgage, then spent decades servicing it, hoping property appreciation alone would solve everything. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. And meanwhile, they neglected everything else. Shares, business ownership, multiple income streams. This is why so many Australians are technically wealthy on paper while still feeling financially anxious emotionally. Their net worth increased. Their freedom didn't. And there's another reason most people never become wealthy. They start too late. Not because they're irresponsible, because life keeps pushing investing further down the list. First, it's rent, then the car, then the wedding, then children, then school fees, then mortgage stress. People keep telling themselves, "I'll invest properly later." But later arrives much faster than people expect, and compounding cares enormously about time. Someone investing $500 a month starting at 25 can finish dramatically ahead of someone investing much more starting at 40, not because they were smarter, because time did most of the work. And this is where many Australians completely misunderstand wealth building. They think wealth comes from giant moves, a lucky stock pick, a massive salary, a business exit. But for most ordinary wealthy Australians, that's not what happened. They simply maintained a gap for a very long time. They spent less than they earned, invested consistently, avoided destructive debt, and repeated the process for decades. That sounds boring, because it is. Wealth building is repetitive, not exciting, and that is exactly why most people fail at it. Because modern life constantly pushes the opposite message. Spend now, upgrade now, reward yourself now, finance it now. Australia built an entire culture around lifestyle inflation, and social media made it dramatically worse. People compare constantly. The holidays, the renovations, the new cars, the luxury apartments. Everyone feels pressure to look successful long before they actually are. So instead of quietly building assets, people buy visible status. And visible status becomes extremely expensive, especially when it's financed. Now here's something almost nobody talks about. A lot of Australians secretly believe wealth is mostly luck, that rich people either inherited money or got incredibly fortunate. And yes, luck matters, timing matters, but this belief becomes dangerous. Because once wealth feels unattainable, people stop behaving like builders. They stop investing, stop learning, stop planning long-term. They emotionally disconnect from the possibility completely. And that mindset quietly guarantees the outcome. Because wealth building requires belief first. You need to believe small, consistent actions matter. Otherwise, you will never stay in the game long enough to see the results. Now here's what most people don't realize about Australians who actually built serious wealth. For a long time, their lives looked completely ordinary. The compounding happened quietly. Portfolio slowly growing, debt slowly shrinking, income gradually increasing. Nothing looked dramatic. Then, eventually, the curve bent. And suddenly, their assets started growing faster than their effort. But most people quit before this moment arrives, because the early years feel painfully slow. Saving your first $10,000 feels hard. Your first $100,000 feels almost impossible. But after that, the math changes. Your money starts contributing more to your growth than your effort does. And that's the moment wealth building finally feels real. So here's the real reason most Australians never become wealthy. They never create enough margin for long enough to let compounding fully take over. Lifestyle grows faster than assets. Spending grows faster than investing. And eventually, they wake up at 50 or 60 realizing they earned good money for decades without building much freedom at all. But here's the good news. Once you understand this, everything changes. You stop chasing the wrong things. You stop trying to look wealthy and start quietly becoming wealthy instead. Consistently, deliberately, patiently. Because the path still exists in Australia. It's just far less glamorous than most people expected. And ironically, that's exactly why it still works. If this changed how you think about money, subscribe and turn on notifications, because the Australians quietly building real wealth right now are doing something very different from everyone else.